Ladies and gentlemen, Binnall of America!
And now, ladies and gentlemen, your host, Tim Binnall.
No commercials, no subscriptions, no network, no rules, and at the end of the day, my friends, no comparison. Welcome to another edition of BOA The Revival. Really looking forward to tonight's show because it's going to be kind of a getting to know you episode. I have seen this week's guest on social media quite a bit. He's a workhorse. He's prolific. He has mad hustle, folks. I see him all the time, and he's got so much stuff going on. And I'm like, this guy is amazing. And I think through the magic of the algorithms, because we had Monique Too Soon on the show a while back for the Halloween Spooktacular. And she's really tight with Sam Baltrusis, our guest tonight. And so then, Facebook's like, all right, well, let's get these two together. So I started seeing all this Sam Baltrusis, and I'm like, I got to talk to this Sam Baltrusis. I feel like, and I find out he lives like 3 or 4 towns over from me. And I'm like, this is amazing. And I'm like, I want to talk to this guy. He's got a lot going on. I think folks can, really find out more about the ghost world, which we've been getting into a lot over the last few months here on Binnall of America. So with all that said, welcome to the show, Sam. I'm really looking forward to talking to you.
Thanks for having me on.
Now, we always start out when we have a newcomer on the show, the bio, the background, who is Sam Baltrusis? How did you get mixed up in all this?
Yeah, so I was a journalist for 20 years before getting into the paranormal. So I grew up in Florida, moved here in the 90s. So here is in Boston, Massachusetts, went to college in Boston. Then I moved to New York for about 10 years and then moved back to Boston in 2007. So journalist for most of the time. I did write the occasional paranormal themed article as a journalist, and I worked in radio, television, and also print. And then in early 2012, I wrote my first book called Ghosts of Boston. And that kind of was my juggernaut. It kind of exploded. And I went from that first book, I got a 3-book deal with the History Press. And the one that I'm known for probably the most is Ghosts of Salem. And when I write my books, I immerse myself at the location. So was a tour guide in Salem and worked various jobs in Salem, Massachusetts.
Wow. Oh, awesome. I like that. I really like that. So you get embedded in the scene. That's really cool. Oh, wow. All right. We have to get back into that. Now, I see over the course of doing my research into what you're all about that you're a clairvoyant also.
Yeah, I'm a clairvoyant as well. And that's something that I was in the crystal closet, if you will, for many years. Because when you're a journalist and you're like, hey, I'm also clairvoyant, it doesn't really fly with your colleagues. So I was kind of did it on the down low, if you will. So if I was working on an article, I would use my abilities to figure things out. And then I would call it intuition back in the day. But I had... Clairvoyance is where you actually see spirits. So I've had it since I was a kid, and I tried to put paranormal blinders on and pretend like it wasn't actually happening, but it was, and it just kind of fought it for most of my life.
Interesting. So spirits come to you, and do they communicate?
Oh yeah, and sometimes it's hard to turn it off, and sometimes it's stronger than other times, and it's a muscle that you work. And for me personally, I try my best to only use it when I use the ability when I need to use it. And so that really depends on the situation. But sometimes the spirits will literally wake me up, and I have to communicate with them. I do set boundaries with the spirit realm, so I kind of turn it on, turn it off, and I've learned that. But for many years, I couldn't turn it off, and I've got to the point now where I can, and it's something that I use when I need to use it, and I try my best to set boundaries with the spirit realm. Okay,
so I've never actually I've had people on the show who are kind of like, yeah, I think I'm sensitive, but they're not as specific as you. So right. I really might want to drill into this some more here. So
sure.
So you can't see the future or anything like that. It's sort of just confined. You just got the limited. It's so limited. You see, you really got the short end of the stick, didn't you? You can only talk to ghosts. So So that's your gift, that they come to you. Do they say here, like, I had like a million questions. We'll start like, do they come, if it's a complete stranger ghost, it comes to you, are they like, hey, I'm whoever, and I'm here to talk to you about X, Y, and Z?
So there's different clairs, and I can tap into different clairs. So there's clairaudience where you can hear spirits communicate, and there's also clairvoyance. Clairvoyance is usually you'll see it in your mind's eye, so it's not necessarily a spirit in front of you. Sometimes it'll manifest as a spirit in front of you, so it really depends on the situation. So yeah, a lot of times when I turn it on, I'll go to a location, and I also have what is called psychometry, where you can touch an object and get like mind pictures of what's happening there. So it really helps when you're writing about history and when you're going to a location like Salem, and you can touch an object and maybe get some information to help you write a book about a certain person that may have been marginalized by history. And so what I've tried to do is really hone my gift for the marginalized, the ones that didn't have a voice during from history, and Salem witch trials, the American Revolution, and we're surrounded by history in Massachusetts. So this has been a really prime location for me to be able to use my gift. But do other spirits come through? Absolutely. I just try my best to hone it, because it's a lot of energy to be able to communicate with spirits. Sometimes I'll see them, sometimes I'll hear them. The problem with clairvoyance is that you can't always, it's like playing charades. So you're trying to figure out what they're trying to communicate to you. And sometimes it's like literally like they'll do movements and you're like, oh, that's, I had someone say, if you're really a clairvoyant, then what am I reading? And he was holding the book like where I couldn't see it. And so a woman, I think it's his grandmother, kind of popped in behind him and was acting out Catcher in the Rye. And so she was like, she had like a pitcher's mitt and she was doing like a sickle cutting rye. So it literally is like playing charades.
Wow. That's wild. And I assume this touching thing is not like Midas touch where you're screwed. Where like you everywhere you go, you go to like pick up a bottle. You're like, oh, this was put in the factory by Barney, and I don't want to know all this. I just want the water. So you must have to like kind of pick something up like this. You'd be like, all right, who dropped this pack of cigarettes at this thing? And you kind of can come up with maybe like a vision.
Yeah, so it's kind of like remember the show That's So Raven? I'll have like I'll touch something. It'll be like a tree, and I'll touch a tree and and have this moment of vision of. Usually it's someone that maybe I want to communicate with or maybe not, and they'll have a vision, and it's usually from the past and not in the future.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that makes sense. Interesting. Wow, this is really wild. Yeah, like I said, I don't think I've ever had someone who was so openly gifted on the show. Like most people are kind of timid about it, where they're like, yeah, I think I kind of, or I have sort of a sense. And, I don't know if I have any of that because I'm just skeptical in general. So I kind of think that I'd probably I don't know. I'll be like, oh, it turns out I'm actually whatever. And I just kept pushing it out of my head. Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah, for me, so having the background in journalism, and I really work hard in my historical research and when I write my books. And I will say, like, having kind of been open about my clairvoyance with the public, there is sort of a fine line, like, hey, they kind of identify you only as a clairvoyant. But I've also written 18 books, and I'm really proud of my research in my books. Though, did I use my gifts to uncover some of that research? Absolutely. I kind of use it in hand. It's something that I used as a journalist as well. So it's one of those things that, I am open about it, but it's not 100% of who I am and who I want to be known as. And I want people to know me for my work, and whether it involves my abilities or whether my writing skills or my research skills, I'm hoping that they would, it's like a whole package,
Yeah, absolutely.
That make it work for my books.
Yeah, right. For sure. Yeah. Well, I only thought of you as an author, and it was only until I got more into it that I'm like, oh, he's also clairvoyant. So that's interesting because that kind of informs the books in a way. Now, did you always have an interest in the paranormal growing up?
No, I was terrified. Most of my life I was terrified. I'm still chicken. I did write a book called Fueled by Fear.
Right.
And But in the book, I talk about all my fears, and a lot of them are really irrational fears, like sleeping with a light on, fear of clowns, fear of all sorts of things. And what I found was when I would go to a location, I would have pretty extreme experiences during an investigation, whether I'll get scratched or pushed, or all people would be terrified when they go to investigation with me. And I was kind of like I was a lightning rod for these darker energies. And so what I found was I was feeling like these entities are fueled by fear. And so if I kind of cut off my emotion, that extreme emotion, the activity kind of got less, I guess, over the top, and more where I can focus on their story. So that's something I've been really working on the past 2 years or so, is not to give them fear, like them as in the entities that I encounter, whether it's in Salem or, Lizzie Borden house or wherever I go, where I've had extreme experiences in the past, that, not to give them the fear. And, do I still have over the top experiences? Yes, but no, it's nowhere. I'm not afraid like I was, and I don't give them that fear.
Yeah. Well, that's been a long-standing theory with the supernatural, if you will. The fear is like some kind of energy that they're drawing upon. These dark forces in a lot of ways. Right. And even if they're not necessarily dark, it could just be like that. It's such a powerful force that it can generate whatever is in the ether can be like, oh, all right, there's some good shit going on over here. Let's go over there and see what's going on, So, yeah, it's very compelling. Now, this is kind of some kismet, actually. We're only doing the audio here, but I'll show you. I've been drinking out of this all day. This is not, and it was not intentional. I got my Lizzie Borden cup because I went down there during the pandemic when no one was there, which was like the best time ever to sightsee in Massachusetts. I did Plymouth and all the haunts, all the places where the castle, Hammond Castle, all the places that you otherwise get swamped with tourists. But during the pandemic, it was like, oh, there's no one here at the Lizzie Borden house. This is fantastic. So you are deeply connected to this Lizzie Borden story, the whole case and family. Yeah. So there's a lot to unpack here. So let's start with sort of your, I hesitate first to give people the thumbnail. I hate doing this because it's like, okay, so people don't know the case. So can you give us the thumbnail on the fucking Lizzie Borden case? I'm sure you've done this a million times. I've heard the story many times. I've been to the house. So to me, it's like, okay, I'm going to check my watch now while Sam catches everybody else up to speed. But that's how it works in this thing. So tell us briefly the Lizzie Borden story.
Sure. And so the whole backstory, just to kind of to tag into what you said before, I also, like during the pandemic, I used it as an opportunity to go to all these locations, including the Lizzie Borden bed and breakfast. I was really good friends with the previous owner who actually passed away. And I'm assuming if you went during COVID, then you also met Leanne as well. But since the new owners haven't gone back as much, but the whole thumbnail for Lizzie Borden back in 1892, there was a horrific murder in Fall River, actually a double homicide. And it was in the wee hour, the morning of August of 1892. Lizzie Borden's father, Andrew Borden, was bludgeoned to death along with his stepwife, Abby Borden. And so that was the crime of the century. And Lizzie was ultimately brought in for trial, questioned. She was one of the two people that were in the house during the murders, including Bridget Sullivan, who was the maid who lived upstairs. And Lizzie claimed that she was innocent. However, all the evidence, if you will, kind of pointed to her, and she was ultimately acquitted and lived a pretty miserable life. She moved to what she called Maplecroft and changed her name. She liked to be called Lizbeth. And she was, in my opinion, a very philanthropic woman in the sense that she really gave to the community, but the community did not give back to her. They shunned her for most of her life. And so, yeah, that's the story. And I will tell you, when I first started writing about this case, and it's something that I've been drawn to and I'm kind of obsessed with but also terrified of since I was younger. My first story as a journalist for like a major publication, I wrote for Newsweek magazine back in the 90s. And it was on the Lizzie Borden house the murder house being turned into a bed and breakfast. So that was my first article. And
wow.
So fast forward, moving back in 2007, and I couldn't go inside at first. I was really terrified to walk inside the murder house, and probably because I also identified as sensitive at the time. So I'm really sensitive. I'm getting really bad vibes, but I also had nightmares too that turns out that was tied to the murders, and kind of knowing the basics. I didn't want to go inside the house. I didn't know what I was expecting to see. And also, too, I'm a psychometrist. Maybe I would touch something and replay the murders or something. I didn't know what was going to happen.
Right, yeah.
I ultimately, kind of worked through my fears, investigated the location a lot. And the last time I investigated it before filming, I filmed a show called Curse of Lizzie Borden with Dave Schrader and Chris Fleming. And that was actually filmed during COVID. But I went there. It was the March 13th, right before COVID, kind of just everything shut down. I think it was 2020 when it shut down, and I went there and I had a really profound experience. That on the 13th, and then a year later, I filmed the show Curse of Lizzie Borden, and but there's a whole reason why I've been so drawn to this case that I didn't know until about 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah. Well, exactly. And the reason is that you're related to Lizzie Borden, right?
I am. Yeah. Yeah. So
how'd you even find this out?
My mother. So it's weird. I didn't even think it was possible, to be honest with you. I grew up in Florida. My dad was in the Navy. My parents met in Pensacola, Florida, and so I never thought that I had any familial ties to New England.
Yeah, why would you? Yeah, it makes no sense. Yeah, especially a notorious heinous murder. Yeah,
and so. And I always thought I was Native American. My mother was like, "Yeah, you're Native American." I'm like, "Oh," and I kind of embraced that Native Americanness, and so I moved here. I felt called to go to college in New England, and I remember just everyone was like, "Where are you going to college?" And they're all going because it was in Florida, so they were like, "I'm going to University of Miami or Tulane," and I'm like, "I'm going to Boston," and so I ended up going to college here in the '90s. Was really drawn to the Salem witch trials, and I studied. I was a communications major in college, but I also had a lot of history stuff really interested me. And so my mother, while I was doing writing these books and writing about the Salem witch trials and writing about the Lizzie Borden case in my book, Mass Murders, my mother was doing genealogical research on Ancestry.com. And a lot of things have changed because of Ancestry.com, but also there's a forensic genealogy, it's called, where you combine using DNA coupled with traditional genealogical research. And so some things were uncovered that were shocking. And one of them was innocent Cornell Borden, who we knew was the great-grandmother of Lizzie Borden, but we didn't necessarily know, her whole. She was originally called Innocent Lake Borden. She was. Her name was changed because of her father was accused of murdering his mother. So this is our tie to Lizzie Borden. Was another murder that happened in the 1600s. Yeah. So this person was sort of like the missing piece, Innocent Cornell Borden, and she ties me to Lizzie Borden, my family to Lizzie Borden, and my mother found this out. I'm like, oh my God, this makes. I wasn't surprised with Lizzie Borden. Some of the others I was very surprised about, like the Putnam family, who were the major accusers during the Salem witch trials, and that one broke my heart because I demonized them on my tours. And Lizzie was not as shocking because I felt like after getting that initial, knowing that I'm related to the Putnams, the Lizzie Borden connection made a lot of sense. Because even my aunt, who was sort of the rebel in the family, looks just like Lizzie Borden. So it all kind of made sense. And it also makes sense that a lot of the women in my family lineage that are well known were killers or either acquitted killers like Lizzie or known killers. And this is something that was found out while doing the research. We're also related to Eileen Wuornos, who was a serial killer. Yeah. And Eileen Wuornos is also related to Lizzie too. And that's something that hasn't been public because it's like a genealogical revelation that was found because of this missing piece, Innocent Cornell Borden.
Innocent. Interesting.
Yeah.
I was very confused by that innocent part. So you say, because I was like, what are the fucking odds that this old lady's named Innocent and all that happened later? But then you're just telling me they changed the name. So it's like, oh, okay. Then that makes more sense. I was like, that's like astronomical that her ancestor would be named Innocent.
Well, Innocent was called Innocent because her mother, Sarah Earle, who was my great grandmother, that's the connector, is she was also accused of murdering Thomas Cornell's mother, Rebecca Briggs, and so Innocent was sort of like publicly saying my daughter, I'm innocent, Sarah Earle's innocent, and also Thomas Cornell, who was hanged for the murder for murdering his mother in Portsmouth, Rhode Island, and so she was actually named as sort of like a public, like we're innocent, and
gotcha.
What was interesting about the Rebecca Briggs murder, the case with Thomas Cornell, who was accused, it was spectral evidence was used to accuse him. So,
really?
Yeah, and that if there is a curse on the family, I think it's related. That case is to me the core. Like that's when it all went haywire.
Interesting. So, and spectral evidence being like the testimony of what? Of ghosts?
Of a ghost, yeah.
Like, how was that conveyed?
So Rebecca Briggs, her brother, after she died in a fire. So what the story was is she was standing in front of a fireplace. She was kind of a ragged woman. Like she was sort of like she would smoke a pipe and kind of like a, kind of cranky, but this is the 1600s. So apparently women were a lot different back in the 1600s.
Yeah.
But
she sounds like an old lady Binnall. She may be related to me. I got to do my genealogy. That sounds like my grandma.
Yeah. She was like smoking a pipe. And so the story is she fell into the fire, which was unfortunately was kind of a common phenomenon back in the 1600s. Well,
perfect sense.
Jonathan Briggs, her brother, had a dream that the son, Thomas Cornell, pushed her into the fire. And so that was used as evidence to accuse and execute Thomas Cornell, who was Innocent Cornell's father. And this was in Portsmouth, Rhode Island, which is actually where my family is originally from. And that was, I'm like, we're from Portsmouth, Rhode Island. And my mother, who was doing Ancestry.com, she's like, Sam, we're from Portsmouth, Rhode Island. I'm like, Mom, it's Portsmouth. And she was, telling me what happened is our great grandfather came in. He was a fisherman. So he was married in Portsmouth, Rhode Island. He took a boat all the way down to around Florida and settled in the panhandle of Florida, and got a new wife. And so. Yeah, exactly. So he was a playboy, but he was also avoiding sort of the family from Portsmouth for whatever reason, and so yeah, it's like this. The story is definitely shocking, knowing that we're even the Innocent Cornell story, which I didn't know as well as I know Lizzie Borden and the Putnam family. That was shocking. Digging more into that story too.
Yeah. That's a wild story. Yeah. And spectral evidence. That's really, that's bizarre that they allowed that kind of thing back then. That's wild. So you have investigated this case, obviously. Do you have, because I was looking at I forget whereabouts I was reading in my research here, but that you believe you have communicated with Lizzie at the house? Is this my understanding?
I mean, no. I mean, I really.
Okay, am I wrong there?
No, yeah, it's okay.
I didn't say I was a good researcher.
No, it's complicated. So, okay. So if you look at the show I was on called Curse of Lizzie Borden with Dave Schrader. So I actually was communicating with Eliza Borden, who was also another family member.
All right, there you go.
And so definitely Eliza Borden. She was the one that killed her children, and actually right next door to the Lizzie Borden murder house. And that's another little known case that I didn't know much about until after I found that I was related to the Borden family. And so I think my theory is that whatever is at the Lizzie Borden house is not necessarily Lizzie's disembodied soul. I think that it could be like a splinter that's psychically imprinted itself on the land. I call it Crazy Lizzie. So there is something there that identifies as Lizzie, but I don't think it is Lizzie. Or Lizbeth, as she likes to be known. If she's going to haunt a location, it's going to be Maplecroft, which is her later in life home. So have I communicated with Lizzie? I mean, yes and no. When we did film this show, we did a seance, and there was an entity that claimed to be Lizzie that took over Dave Strader while he was automatic writing. And
okay, maybe that's where I go.
Yeah. And if you watch the show, like he was like, this is not a woman, he was automatic writing and fighting it. And he's like, this, whatever is trying to use me is not a woman. And it wasn't. And so I do think that I have a really strong connection to her, and I can call her, but I will say that I don't. I told her this when now that I know that I'm related to her, that I'm not going to call her back to the murder house. Like I think a lot of people do, and I'm like, as your distant relative, I'm like, I'm not going to call you back. And I had this conversation like with her spirit, and I'm like, I'm not going to call you back. She hated it there. It had so many horrible memories. Why do you want to be called back to a location when your father and your stepmother were brutally murdered? And she didn't take responsibility for the murders. She doesn't. So the theory is maybe she was like disassociating, during the murder, or maybe this alter ego, Crazy Lizzie, if you will, was the murderer. And if you watch the show Curse Lizzie Borden, our theory is that maybe she was taken over or possessed by a darker entity that was responsible for the murders.
Okay. Well, I was going to ask you what your theory is. So that's kind of interesting. All right. So you don't subscribe per se to, there's all these sort of like, I would call them like loophole theories, where it's like this person like slipped in through the back door and fucking did it and ran out, and then it all got pinned on her. There's like 5 or 6 different characters that like, it's like Clue. They kind of like come running in and out of the house, where it's like, oh, I don't know, maybe it could have been the maid. I don't know, so everyone kind of makes a case for different characters.
Yeah, if you look at the case, and I really, really have looked hard at the case, and really tried to immerse myself in it. So John Morris is suspicious. John Morris is the uncle. The night of the murders, he kind of came in out of the blue and decided to stay in the home. He normally would stay on the 3rd floor, but the night before the murders happened, he was staying on the 2nd floor, which is where the murders happened, which is kind of fishy to me. He also, after the murders, after Abby was murdered, he slept in the room where she was murdered the night of the murders, which is really suspicious. So, But John Morris was he wasn't included in the investigation. He was investigated, but he had a really strong alibi. His alibi was like, I went down to visit other family members, but his testimony was suspicious because he knew every little thing, every person he talked to. It was like, I talked to the Reverend, on the corner, and then I saw this group. So he had a really, really strong alibi, and so I still find it kind of fishy to the point where I think that maybe he had some kind of role in it as well. And then Emma, who was the sister, who to me, out of Lizzie or Emma, she would have been probably more of a likely suspect because of her temperament. And Emma was in Fairhaven when the murders happened, so she's out of the question. And so. Yeah, there's other theories too that maybe there was an intruder. There was a lot of suspicious murders that happened in that time with hatchets. There was a lot of hatchet murders that happened in 1892, and so I feel like that the hatchets were significant. There was so when I was communicating with Lizbeth, she kept saying Bertha Manchester, and I'm like, who's Bertha Manchester? And when I say she's talking to me, like I was getting clairaudient like messages, and sometimes I'll use other like kind of like spirit boxes or dowsing rods. Like I'll ask yes or no questions, but I use different things to kind of get to communicate with the spirits. But Bertha Manchester was a murder that happened while Lizzie was in prison, and she was killed in a very similar fashion. Like she was murdered by a hatchet or by an axe, and she and there was a man that was accused and actually wasn't executed. He was sent back to his country, but yeah, so there was a story that was really similar. There's other hatchet murders that happened all over the country that are still cold cases that some people think that maybe are somehow tied or related.
Like the Velasquez case you're talking about?
Well, the Velasquez axe murders. The people always try to sit, and even the new owners are seeing, because they own both properties. They own the Velasquez.
I know, yeah, Simon. I didn't want to bring that up, but yeah, it's an odd situation going on there. And beyond the paranormal, there
is no way that the murders of the Velasquez axe murder house are tied to the Lizzie Borden house.
I kind of figured as much.
Yeah, and so that part is when people try to bring up the similarities, because there are similarities, but there's other murders not necessarily as far away as the Velasquez axe murder house. But even like New Orleans, which is also very far too, there's some cases like there's the axemen around that time too. And I'm actually going to New Orleans in 2 weeks to investigate that case in New Orleans. There's a lot of murders that happened in New Orleans it was after the Borden murders, but it was in that same era.
Right. And well, also you got to consider that the publicity of the Borden case probably made axe murdering kind of the way to do it for a while. People were like, you know what? It's like that copycat effect. They read in the paper. That girl chopped up her family up there in Massachusetts. Fuck that. Yeah. I'm going out with my axe, man. I'm going to fucking my mother-in-law's driving me nuts. It's axing time.
Yeah, it was the crime of the century, so it got a lot of publicity. So you're right. There's a lot of potential for that to have copycat murders, but also too, if you look at hatchets, were very, very common back in the late 1800s and early 1900s, because they had it for chopping wood, and so it was probably more the accessibility of the weapon back in that time. Like they didn't have guns or not. Well, they had knives, obviously, but they'd have access to guns as freely as they did to axes or hatchets back in the late 1800s.
Yeah. Axes were like the guns of today.
Right.
They're like,
let's use a hatchet.
Yeah. Back then they were like, what are we doing about hatchets in schools? We need to get these hatchets out of the fucking schools. Kids. So let me see what I got here for you. Yeah. All right. So that's your theory on Lizzie Borden. Interesting. All right. And so you do, just to clear up, so I was a little confused. So you have kind of like communicate with her. You said you spoke to Lizbeth. So you have, but she's obviously, you haven't gleaned any, I guess you got that insight about the other case. So maybe, interesting. Yeah. So it's like she can't come through. It's like, it's not like a Hallmark movie where she can come through and be like, Sam, here's how it went down. So you can't you know what I'm saying? I'm sure people kind of expect that in a way where it's like, well, if you talk to her, tell us how it all happened. So apparently she clearly cannot convey this.
Right. So when I communicated with her, this was, of course, using spirit boxes and my abilities, a combination of different things. This is at Maplecroft, which is her later in life home. So she doesn't remember the murder. She doesn't want to remember the murder. She doesn't want to talk about the murder. She doesn't want to be called back to the murder house. I have an EVP where I was asking her, Lizzie, did you kill your father and stepmother? And there is a blood-curdling scream of anguish, like, why are you asking me this? And so I stopped asking her the question, that
makes sense.
Yeah, and after that, I'm like, you know what? This cry from beyond was so so much emotion and so much pain that I'm not going to ask her that again. And the producers of the show were like, "Can you ask this question?" And I'm like, because that's the question everybody wants to know. They want to know, did you kill your father and stepmother? But she doesn't want to answer that question. She wants to. She doesn't claim responsibility for the murders. I will say though, a lot of my experiences with other people from associated with the murder, like Bridget Sullivan, who was the maid, I've communicated strongly with her too in the past, and also Eliza Borden, who was not, of course, not alive during the murders because it happened prior to 1892. But yeah, I feel like that even Bridget Sullivan. So there was a dream that I had, but this is kind of going back to when I first wrote that article for Newsweek back in the 90s. And when I say it was an article, it was kind of a small article. It wasn't a really big article, but it was still an article on the Lizzie Borden house. And so I had this dream of being in this house. I remember the wallpaper. I am pinned to the bed. Like I'm sitting there, and I see what I eventually learned is Bridget Sullivan walking up the stairs, mortified. She wants me to see this. She takes a hatchet and she puts it into the cistern on the third floor, which is like a closet. And she's showing me like she was an accomplice to the murders. Like that's what she's showing me in this dream that kept having over and over again. Another dream that I had this is kind of the origins of the idea that maybe she was taken over by a darker entity. Was in this dream, it was black and white. I was watching the murders unfold like a black and white 35 millimeter a film, and I could see the couch. The father was on his kind of leaning like back, kind of sleeping on the couch in the parlor, and then you see a woman who I think was Lizzie Borden, and a man standing behind her, kind of like nefarious. He has like a mustache, and he's wearing like a bowler cap, and he's telling her to, and it said this. I had subtitles while I was watching this film in my dream. This is in my dream.
Wow, this is wild. I
know, it's really, really explicit. I wrote this down I was like this. It was terrifying to me. So in the dream, it said Diablo did it, and I would wake up and I was like, and that was my dream. And there was a man standing right behind Lizzie, but you can see her physically holding the hatchet, and I didn't see the murders happen, but I did see the man standing behind her in the dream. And it said, the dream said Diablo did it. Now, do I believe Diablo did do it? I don't know. I know if you look at her physicality, she was a short woman and she was in her 30s. I also, and this is something that I found while writing one of my books or writing a story on it, was that she was injured severely at the church. And I did an investigation later on. This is after filming Curse of Lizzie Borden, at the church that Lizzie Borden was a Sunday school teacher at in Fall River. And she had a pretty horrible accident with a dumbwaiter. So a dumbwaiter fell on her wrist and broke her wrist about a month before the murders. So physically, I would say it would be very difficult for her to commit that heinous of a crime in her right mind. Now, if she was in sort of an altered psychotic state, it's possible. But so yeah, it's still one of those cases that it's a whodunit. I'm like 99% sure that she physically did it, but I don't think she mentally did it.
Yeah. All right. That makes sense. Interesting. So do you interpret the man to be the devil, to be like a dark force? That's kind of how I was picturing this.
That's the thing. Like,
some dude from Fall River named Diablo did it.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It could be. So a lot of my visions and things are in code. So I have to kind of figure out, is it a code? Like, does it mean something else? Does Diablo, that maybe because she was religious and she did go to Sunday school. So maybe that was her interpretation of it. Or maybe actually Diablo did do it. I personally don't necessarily believe in the devil. I feel like that it's sort of like a figment of imagination. But if she believes in the devil, then possibly.
Right, exactly. Very interesting. Now, you've done a bunch of TV shows. I guess I don't want to really sort of get in necessarily to like each specific show, but what's your experience like working in the TV world? Because I'm jaded about paranormal TV because it seems very like, I I don't know, fake, I guess. It's all very orchestrated and everything. I have a hard time watching it. Plus, I work in paranormal all day, so it's like being a chef and then watching The Bear. It's like I can't really, do that. But what do they usually do? What do they usually want you for? They want you to come in and be a clairvoyant? Or do you sort of, I guess you also do talking head segments, right? Where you sort of.
I do talking head a lot. Like that's kind of
these shows. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was an expert. Usually it's on Salem, Massachusetts. And, I actually worked in television as a producer many, many years ago. So my first show, I wrote a book called my first book goes to Boston. I did a show called like Face to Face. It was like Ghostly Encounters Face to Face. And that was in 2012. And so right when I got into the paranormal scene, I was on a TV show. And so they had me as a talking head, and looking back then versus where I am now. Yeah. So it started, I was brought on as a talking head, usually about giving the history of Salem and the ghostly backstory to the locations. And I would recommend locations to producers as well and to the crew. And then when I filmed Curse of Lizzie Borden, I was brought on as a talking head, but then I started the channel while I was filming the show. And my producer friend, Kay Rothman, she was like, we're going to put this on the show. You have to come out of the crystal closet. And I'm like, no, I didn't want to be known publicly as a medium. If you got an investigation with me, you would know, or even just, spend time with me, you would know that I use my gifts all the time. But so I didn't want to go public with it, but it kind of forced me to when I was filming that scene. And so I've done both. I've done talking head segments as an expert, and I've also been on several shows as a medium as well. And so it's kind of a mixed bag. The joke is like, do I get paid double if I go in as a medium and then as a expert? And I don't. I get paid the same, which is not a lot, by the way. So people think you get paid a lot for doing television, and I personally don't get paid. I'm sure that people that do. For my main motivation for doing television is really to sell books. Like that's my main motivation. It's not to be famous. It's really I really am interested in all of this. I really am, and I always have been. But I'm also really scared of it too. So it's sort of this weird combination of fear and interest, and kind of like combining, and also having a encyclopedic knowledge of, especially the Salem witch trials. I know a lot about Salem, and so I feel like that I'm the right person to bring on the shows. But also too, like when you're on and you're trying to be a talking head, and then the spirits try to use you as a vessel to communicate. It's complicated sometimes.
Yeah, I can imagine. Now, I'm kind of obsessed a little bit with like how things work. So
it's okay.
I'm moving back from off the TV for a minute because I want to know as a clairvoyant, right? So can anyone kind of who's crossed over, where can they cross back and forth, or they're just people, or they're just spirits that are here, and then there are others that are just gone? Like you can't get my neighbor Sharon because she's not, like, she doesn't cross back and forth. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like,
yeah. So I think there's different levels. I think there's disembodied souls, and I think that's more rare. Disembodied souls is where they haven't crossed at all, or they don't want to cross because of unfinished business. There are spirits that have crossed and can come back. So whether I personally feel like that Lizzie or Elizabeth has crossed, but she's called back. When I say called back, she's like in a different dimension, and she's called back by investigators like, Lizzie, did you do it? So I don't think she's sort of stuck here. I think that she's already crossed over, but she's able to come back. There are some people that have crossed over and they're never coming back. They're like, I'm done with communicating with people. Usually it's unfinished business, or maybe their loved ones haven't completely crossed. Like there's a lot of, you'll see they're called psychopumps, like spirits that will lead their loved ones after they cross to the other side. So I believe that. I'm also a believer like in thought forms and egregores. I think a lot of this is manifested. And this is something I've really gotten into the past 2 years. And also we talked a little bit about sort of splinters or segmented fragments of a soul that has psychically imprinted itself at a location. So when I'm interacting with Crazy Lizzie at the Lizzie Borden bed and breakfast, I don't really think I'm talking to Lizzie Borden's, as spirit. I feel like I'm talking to a piece of her that psychically imprinted itself in the wind. So there's a lot of theories, and they're different per case generally. But I think a lot of times what we're talking to is like when I'm talking to the spirit, it could just be like a videotape replay, like a residual haunting. They're not necessarily coming back to communicate with me. Their energy's still at the location, and I'm picking up on that energy. Right,
exactly, yeah. All right. It's very hard until you get over to the other side. You really don't know the rules, right?
I know, and I personally don't know either. It's sort of now that I'm getting older, I'm right. And for example, like I'll have like a lot of people ask me like why, like my stepdad passed, and I see him. He comes to me a lot actually, but my mother is like, why doesn't he come to me? And I'm like, I don't know, Mom. He does leave like feathers, and she's like, oh yeah, I found a feather in the bathroom behind the toilet. I'm like, why would there be a white feather behind the toilet, Mom? Like that doesn't like that, to me, like that's enough, but still people want like to see their loved one right in front of them, and unfortunately it's especially if someone that you loved, it's hard. I think it's harder for me to talk to my loved ones than it is for me to talk to people I never met.
Oh yeah, for sure. Isn't that kind of the way in life too, though?
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, here's an interesting question for you. So you find all these, you're aware of all these haunted places. So I talked a little bit. You probably know John Tenney. I talked a little bit with John Tenney about this a long time ago, and still a vexing problem for me. So as you know, I live in Burlington.
Yeah.
It has no haunted history whatsoever. There's no on record, like there's nothing. They never had a ghost thing. It's like crazy, right? So part of me is like, I need to figure out where the ghosts are in this town, because there have to be ghosts. It's like a 200-year-old community. So what, as someone who's a student of the history of the area and also sort of the ethereal realm, let's say, what's your advice on how to find these ghosts? How do I find these ghosts?
Well, my experience with ghosts, like you don't find them, they find you. So if you're looking for them, they're probably like, sorry, bye. Like they're probably playing avoidance. Right. My thoughts, in where we live, I feel strongly Native American. Like there's a whole, like the King Philip's War backstory. This whole region to me it's all about Native American backstory. So I live in Assembly Row, which is not necessarily known as being a haunted hotspot either, but I've had experiences, especially by the Mystic River. And so I think spirits are pretty much everywhere, even in Burlington. But I feel like that you're in Burlington specifically, I would probably say I would say probably Native American backstory. Like there's a lot around this area that have been overlooked by history, I feel, and we there's the praying Indians from that area too. There was a massacre on Deer Island in Boston Harbor that a lot of people don't talk about. And when I actually gave a tour back and forth from Boston to George's Island, and I would talk about the massacre of Deer Island of the praying Indians, and they're actually of Natick that where the praying Indians were, but still, like there's a lot of history in Burlington that I think a lot of that you may eventually uncover. So and I have I had experiences in Burlington with hauntings? Not really, but
I'm telling you, dude, it's no ghosts. Interesting. I'm going to keep you posted, dude. Once I find one, I'm going to bring you in and be like, I found the ghost. You got to come in. You got to talk to this ghost.
Could you imagine, like you're at the mall and you're like a ghost, like, hey, how's it going, Binnall?
Dude, the fucking mall has got to be haunted, dude. The mall has got to be haunted. It's been there for like 25, 30, 40 years, dude.
It's got to be, yeah.
We should talk to the Burlington Mall about doing a ghost hunt.
I think that would be really interesting, because cool. I obviously I have I had experiences at the mall? No, but I feel like that there's a lot of energy there. You can feel it. You can feel the energy when you walk through the mall.
Yeah. Imagine being there after hours, looking around, doing EVPs and shit. It'd be awesome. All right, I'm gonna get on that and see if we can make that happen. That would be cool as hell.
It could be a show, Binnall at the mall.
Wow, Sam, damn, you are good, man.
I am a producer, yes.
Oh man, so you got a thing coming up, Spirit Squad 9. As I said, folks, this is how prolific he is. He's on Spirit Squad 9. I'm like, what the fuck? 9 already. So, but this what stuck out to me. This is coming up, and we can plug this so that people can be a part of this if they're in the area, New England area. But you lead into that by what I want to know about. It says focusing on the concept of shadow work, which is completely foreign to me. Elementals, which I'm fairly well versed in, and darker entities, which, aren't we all, including shadow people and harbingers, which is something I don't know. I know Harbinger of Doom, but I have a feeling that is a very specific sort of thing. So let's talk about shadow work and harbingers and Spirit Squad 9. So lay it out for me, brother.
Well, I mean, just to give a caveat, so Spirit Squad is a group of up and coming mediums that I work with. So I'm a mentor for a lot of people, including I've worked with Monique Too Soon a lot, and so I've worked, with her or Rob, his male equivalent, but worked with Monique Too Soon on her abilities. But I have a whole team of up and coming clairvoyants that have worked all the way up to Spirit Squad 9. So unfortunately, you can't go all the way to level 9 without starting with level 1. So it's not
okay.
Yeah. So
all right.
You work all the way up to 9. So the group that I've been working with, they're to 9. So Spirit Squad is this group of, and we do investigations together. And the investigation style is more of a psychic medium approach to investigating versus going in with equipment, trying to provoke the spirits, and so that's our approach when it comes to the coursework in the class. Again, you have to kind of graduate to that level because it's advanced. But psychopomps are so the harbingers for me are kind of what we were talking about before. That you'll get signs before, say, someone's passing. And I've had experiences with a man wearing a hat, and I'm not going to say Hat Man because I know it's trademarked by Heidi Hollis, but.
Boy.
Yeah, but it's so it's basically I've had a man with a hat, and what I've found from this is something like a family member passes. It's trying to let me know something, and I had a man with a hat sighting right before I had a fire last year, and it literally something with a hat came through the wall to warn me, and so I went from being terrified of this entity to almost kind of embracing it, not with wholeheartedly embracing it, but sort of looking at it with hey, it's trying to tell me something. And so Harbinger is that. So the Mothman's a Harbinger. Giles Corey, during the thing is, supposedly if you see Giles Corey in Salem, something bad will happen, like a fire that decimated Salem in 1914. So I do feel like the Harbingers are not everyone has experiences with harbingers, but I also feel that some of us do have them, and unfortunately I do, but I have learned to embrace it. Shadow work is definitely something that I'm not leading the shadow work. I have a high priestess witch, so some of my members identify as witches, and so it's for them that they're doing the shadow work, which is, to me, and I'm sober, so I've been part of AA for 15 years, and a lot of it's kind of like fifth step work. So it's really taking a hard look at yourself and what motivates you in situations. So that the shadow work is really that kind of looking at what makes you afraid, what makes you tick, and really taking a hard look at that and kind of healing the inner child, if you will. And then the shadow people, for me, I'm a big believer that shadow entities are not always bad. You mentioned John Tenney. His theory is that they're not bad as well. Maybe they're coming out of the light, and they're sort of a lot of people associate shadow figures with darkness, but I don't. I think that it really depends on the shadows. Usually they're trying to manifest, they're trying to use energy to manifest. And so I think a lot of the shadow figures that I've encountered are not always bad. There's, of course, some bad experiences that I've had, but I just think they're misunderstood. So, yeah, Spirit Squad is going to be this small group of people that I work with and I mentor. Okay. That is what I've been focusing on for all 9 sessions, and getting to them to this point where it's almost like toward graduation, if you will, with this group.
And how long you been doing this? This is not an annual thing, then?
So Spirit Squad is something I started right after filming Curse of Lizzie Borden. So it's been about 2.5 years. I really wanted to pull myself away from the paranormal community, the drama in the paranormal community, and just kind of work on people. Seriously, like it's really bad.
No, I'll believe me.
It's really, really bad. So I'm like, you know what? I want a safe spot for people like me. My niece is gifted, and I want, my sister was part of Spirit Squad to help my niece. So sometimes it's like not necessarily to help yourself, but to help your children. Like my sister's helping my niece Aubrey, who's dealing with the same stuff that I dealt with and she dealt with growing up. And so it really depends on the person. Not everybody is gifted in the same way. What's great about Spirit Squad is we all kind of work together as a team to kind of figure things out. So someone will have a vision and like, what does this mean? And someone else will kind of like help them decipher the message that they're getting from the spirit. So it's kind of like a community of people that, community of freaks, if you will, that are loving people. And I love them very much, but it's sort of not open to the public. It's a private group. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. I saw it advertised on your site, so I didn't know if that was like something
I did it.
People could sign up for. I'm trying to move tickets for you here.
No, it's not something that I want to. It's just I want the right people to join Spirit Squad. The ones that need it and they feel it's almost like a calling.
Yeah. Well, it's sort of like I don't know if I would necessarily call it an antithesis, but it's sort of like an alternative to like a ghost hunting group. You're not doing sort of per se a paranormal investigation team kind of thing.
Right. We do investigate together. We do go, but we go with a different approach. It's very empathetic. I'm in the school, like when I was saying I was communicating with Lizzie Borden, almost the idea of spirit therapy, where you're communicating with spirit and trying to tell their story and tell it correctly. But also, if there's reliving trauma, you have to kind of be careful not to re-traumatize the spirits, which is what I was trying to do with Lizzie. I was trying not to bring her back to the murder house or talk about the murders, because that to me is that's traumatic. Like, why do I want to keep asking her, did she murder her father and stepmother? So with a more empathic approach to the spirit realm and to do it, hopefully to help them cross over, or to a lot of the spirits with unfinished business, hopefully to maybe give them some closure so they can move on, if you will. And so that's something that my group is really good at. And do I believe that they're ready to necessarily cross over spirits? Some of them are, but I feel like it's a gift to be able to do it. And I fortunately or unfortunately have that gift. So I have crossed over spirits before. So that's one of the things that I try my best to do. And a lot of times you'll find that the spirits want to kind of tell what they want to tell before they cross over. So that's what we do, is we give them the opportunity to spirits to communicate through us to tell their story before they cross.
Interesting. Now, what is it? Is there any sensation that you feel or anything? What do you experience when you help someone cross over?
So I really started doing this, and that's my first experience with crossing over spirits was on the USS Salem in Quincy, Massachusetts. I was with my dear friend, Colleen, who ended up having an attachment from it. So when you cross over spirits, it can be really dangerous. You're basically opening up the other side. And so that was my first experience it was not a good thing, and to not do it, because other things can come through when you open the veil. So I started, I was terrified of crossing over spirits. I worked with Chris Fleming on Curse of Lizzie Borden. Part of what we did was we crossed over some spirits, and that was my first experience doing that as a medium, and it was life-changing for me, because what the way it works for me is they line up behind me, and I have to work with another medium to kind of build a light to heaven or to a better place, the higher realm, and I almost kind of like push them into the light, like come on guys, and they line up behind me, and I tell their story, and then they can cross over. So when we did Curse of Lizzie Borden, this didn't end up on the show, but we crossed over a lot of spirits, and they're not necessarily Lizzie Borden's spirit, but other spirits involved with the Borden family, like Eliza Borden. She was there when we were crossing over spirits. So it's something that I've done. I don't do it a lot, but it's something that I can do. And I think that it's definitely something when you have a spirit that is really adamant about crossing over, I feel an obligation to help them. And so you have to do it ethically. You have to check with the property. Like and this is horrible, but sometimes you have situations where the property owner does not want to let go of the spirit. They almost have them like in spirit prison, if you will, at the location. So you have to get.
Oh, because it's an attraction.
Yeah, and that to me is heartbreaking. But I have, I have crossed over spirits on the side, if you will. they follow me over. They follow me home, and I'm like, I have to do this. So I generally work with another medium, and the way I work is they line up behind me. So the idea is called a psychopomp. It's sort of they lead the spirit realm to the other side. So I don't always see them, but I can feel them. And for me, there is a energy. They pass through me sometimes. Yeah. So I can feel the energy as they pass through me.
What does it feel like? Do you feel tired afterwards? Are you like, holy shit, that was like,
completely tired, drained. When I channel, so channeling is another gift that I have that if you watch the shows that I've done, I've channeled on the shows, and I will never do it again because what happens is they take me over, and it's a major energy drainer. So yeah, it's completely draining. That's why I don't do it often. It's very rare that I cross over with spirits, but they'll take me over, kind of push through me, and I'll push them through, almost like a filter, if you will, into the light, and then they cross over. So that's how I do it, but it's different every time that I do it.
Has anyone ever come to you and been like, my family member's missing, my family member was murdered, can you fucking help me get some answers to this case? Has that ever happened to you? And what?
Yeah, they have. So part of Spirit Squad, what we do is we worked with cold cases. So this group is kind of on the down low. I also think too, like when you deal with police, well, I mean, I was an investigative journalist for 20 years. So a lot of the work that I did, of course I did the fluff pieces. I did entertainment journalism a lot, but I did do some hardcore crime stories. And I'll tell you the crime stories, did I solve them? Lady of the Dunes is a good example. It's like a case that you and I probably, the Lady of the Dunes of Provincetown. I've written about this case over and over again. I did a show called Historically Haunted Cape Cod, where I did an investigation communicating with her spirit. And that was a cold case for 50 years. And did I solve the case? No, but I feel like by calling her forward and kind of like getting some information, it did sort of put it out there. And the case was finally solved 2 years ago using forensic DNA, which is what I used as well to with my mother for piecing us together with the Lizzie Borden family lineage. But also, that case was a situation where I did work on it, trying to tell her story as well as I could. And it was it was a puzzle piece. I would get information like Tennessee, like that came through. And it turns out that the woman that was the Lady of the Dunes actually was originally from Tennessee. And so I'm like, why am I getting Tennessee? Like, why? Like, and it didn't make any sense. And so Ruth Marie Terry was eventually found out, and the murderer was the man that she was married to. And so this is a case that was used, that was a cold case. Like it was rarely talked about. And then it was ultimately solved very recently using forensic DNA.
All right. But like no one like just off the street has come to you and been like, or at these events or anything. Has anyone met?
I do get that. I do get that. It's sort of like it's to me. Okay, so I was a journalist for a long time, so it's really important for me. Like if it's a case that's 50 years ago, like I wouldn't write about it if it wasn't either a cold case or if it was a recent murder. So have I had situations where a family member has come to me and said, "Hey, I'm in the woods."
I mean, I don't need. You don't have to tell me like Jane Mansfield in Providence came to you or whatever. But I mean, just like what happens then? Do you feel obligated to help these people out and be like, okay, and then that's all I'm kind of.
It's a lot of it's a lot of pressure because I have it, like that. I've had even people that in my life where I have a relative who was a cold case. Actually, one of my cousins was a cold case, and I gave my reading of it. And the thing is, the case is still not solved. But I can see what happened. Like I saw what happened to my cousin, and so yeah, in that situation, I talked to the police. I even gave names for it. But the thing is, if they don't want to solve the case, they don't want to solve the case. It's just one of those things that I have given my information, what I picked up, but I told my aunts and my mother what I was picking up, and it made sense to them. So, like, what really happened?
Right. Well, see, that comes to sort of like the spectral testimony you were talking about earlier, in a sense, where it's like maybe the cops are like, "Look, we know you're right about this, Sam, but we can't fucking take this to court because we don't have the only like evidence, that works is what you have. We have no DNA or eyewitnesses or anything that'll actually convict this person, but we're pretty sure you're right because we have all the sort of like relationship situations, or whatever that would make sense that these were the murderers. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like you were saying when you were a journalist and you used your gift. You not necessarily could like say how you got the information in the article, so you kind of almost have to like back engineer it. It's like they can't really back engineer from the information that's,
and I couldn't use something unless I could prove it. And that's the thing, like that's how I feel even talking about this is like, if I can prove it, then I'll say it. But I'll say, this is what I'm picking up. And I'll tell you, like, even in Spirit Squad, when we work with a group, I tell them, like, listen, guys, there's no wrong answers. But when you're dealing with loved ones who have lost a family member, that's serious. That's very serious. You're telling me, hey, I think that your loved one ran into the woods and went missing, right. That's why they're missing. And even the Sylvia Brown case, where she said, "Oh no, your daughter's dead." Yeah. And it was completely wrong. So there is pressure of getting things wrong. I do think that there's you get kind of clues, and there's like Easter eggs you have to kind of figure out. And sometimes I'm really good at it, and sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I'll get it completely wrong, and I don't want to get it wrong. And if you look at my body of work, I'm very confident in what I do. I'm very confident I'm gifted, but I also doubt myself very much too. I did a show called The House in Between Two, and I was on camera, and this is really hard for me to talk about, but I picked up a lynching, and that's a horrible thing to pick up on the property. And I'm like, there's an African-American man, he's being hanged, and he's buried right here. And I was picking it up, and I'm crying thinking about it, because it's like so much pressure. What if I got that wrong? What if, and so it turns out I was right, but that could have destroyed my career, by saying that, like, what did you get, Sam? If you're really a clairvoyant, what'd you get? And so I got it. I did. And I proved myself, it's like, how many times do I have to prove myself?
All right. Yeah, no, exactly. Jeez. That's powerful. Yeah. Well, we'll move on to a lighter note, because this past holiday season, you were working with Santa Claus.
I was, yeah. I find that raising your vibration is really important in this field. So I tend to take side jobs that make me happy, and Santa Claus always makes me happy. So yeah, I did it this is like the 10th season that I've done it. I took a break for about 3 years. So especially it was horrible trying to manage Santa Claus during COVID. It really was. It was like, sort of like, okay, you have to sit 20 feet away from Santa Claus, little kid. So I do that just as a side gig, just to kind of like make me smile and be happy. I actually worked in Burlington for one season. That's where I trained. Yeah, so we could have crossed paths if you ever sat in Santa's lap. I don't think so, Sam.
Not recently. So what's the job though? Like, I'm fascinated by, because the mall is in my blood, so it's like the mall Santas is kind of like a tangential thing that interests me. So you manage. What does that mean? What does that mean? You manage Santa?
We just so basically Santa Claus is there, manage the photos, so the photo operations.
Okay.
Also making sure that you have families that line up to come and talk to Santa, so you have to have like a grumpy elf to sorry, Santa's gonna go to the next kid, So right. I'm the grumpy elf. Well, I mean, I try not to be grumpy. It makes me happy and I take the pictures with the families too.
Okay, all right.
But I'll tell you, that's really hard getting that perfect shot with a screaming kid and Santa Claus. That's a lot of work and a lot of energy.
And do you hang out with Santa?
Well, I mean, when I'm on set, I do. Yeah. I mean, I hang out with Santa. I'm in charge of Santa. So I'm like, Santa, you need to take a break. You're looking a little haggard. And we don't say take a break. We say Santa is feeding the reindeer. Santa, you need to go feed the reindeer.
Yeah. All right. Nice.
And
interesting.
My job is to kind of to make sure that Santa's happy, that the families are happy, that the photos are good, because I think that's something could go really awry really quickly if you don't have the right setup and the right environment. For me, the ones that really emotionally move me, as far as when we do special events for say kids with autism that aren't able to go to a traditional Santa setup, and we're able to work with the autistic kids to be able to have an experience with Santa. And the reason why this is so important to me, and kind of oddly emotional tonight, I don't know why I'm so emotional, but for me as a kid, my parents divorced when I was a child, so my only one Christmas when I was around 6 or 7 years old was just this. My only Christmas gift was to be able to see Santa Claus at the mall. And that's something that has always stuck with me my whole life. And I try my best to give back to the spirit of Santa. I still believe in Santa Claus. I think that even though there's obviously Santa Claus isn't real, but I do believe in the spirit of Santa Claus. And so I try my best to nurture that spirit. And I'm probably going to end up being a Santa Claus eventually in my future. I can feel it. It's like a calling almost.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
All right. So you envision as you get older, you'll become a Santa Claus.
I mean, I don't, it's one of those things I don't want it to happen, but my life is pointing it in that direction. So I'm like, you know what? Maybe I should just embrace it. That means I have to grow out a beard.
You grow the beard? Yeah. You got to really commit. Cause that's one of the things when I've seen the Santa at the mall, and I'm sure, I don't know if you have a picture with your Santa, but I'm sure he's these are legit Santas. There are that's kind of I don't want to. That's why I'm also part of me doesn't want to ruin the magic of that's why I'm when you hang out with Santa, it's I'm sure there's conversations where it's you're breaking the fourth wall or whatever. Because part of it's when you see these are bad Santas. These are legit Santa Claus. You walk by them in the hallway and when the Sam guy is ushering them to feed the reindeer, I'd walk past them and be like, holy shit, dude, that's Santa. Wow, you see him up close. It's really impressive.
Well, so Burlington is the ultimate mall Santa. And seriously, it's one of the most profitable Santa experiences in the country. And so the Santa that's currently at Burlington actually is one of the ones that I managed in my past in Chestnut Hill. So it's sort of he's at the very upper echelon of Santas.
Yeah.
At the top.
Nice. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, so Burlington is the number one, top 3 malls in the country for Santa. Wow. And so when you go there, you're completely Santa. But yeah, when I talk to Santa, I don't go, "Hey Jack, how's it going?"
Right.
Hey Santa, because I still believe in Santa. I know that sounds silly, but I really do, and that comes across with my interactions with Santa. I'm like, listen, you are embodying. This is a really important role, and you are embodying Santa. So everything that you do has to embody Santa, and so it's important for me to kind of keep that magic flowing, and not and make sure that the press love the bad Santa story,
right?
And they're always like looking for that one moment that Santa's like grumpy to a child, or drinking liquor or smoking a cigarette or something, and they're human too. But when you're Santa, when you have that outfit on, you are Santa, and you have to embrace it.
Yeah. Well, it's really amazing. Anyone who come to my mall, I guess, and come see the Santa. You want to see a world-class Santa, apparently. Yeah, he's amazing. It's really something else.
And your mall has a line, literally, like
it's crazy.
It's crazy. So I would say go to, because I run the smaller boutique mall. I actually ran Santa at Faneuil Hall this past year, and we didn't have a lot of people. It was more of a boutique experience, and I love the small, like not the lines. I like the smaller boutique experiences with Santa.
Yeah. Oh, of course. Yeah, because then you're not waiting in line forever, and also you're not like feel rushed to to talk to Santa. Yeah. It's a pretty serious. It's an interesting subgenre or community. I'd be interested in digging into that someday and finding more just about how it all works and everything. Like how long these guys have to train to be Santa. I don't know.
There's Santa camp.
You said you learned it. Yeah, at Burlington, you train there. So yeah, it's great.
Yeah, there's Santa camp, but also too like there's rules. Yeah, like rules you have to follow. And someone having worked with Santa for 10 years, like I'm kind of like, I know all the rules, like you feed the reindeers. It's not a lot of rules, but it's like things that you say that to kind of keep up the magic. And I've pondered the idea of writing a book on Santa, but I also don't want to kind of like ruin the magic, giving sort of the behind the scenes of Santa, because I do feel like it's like a very special position to be in, and I think it's I have a lot. The people that play Santa are in that role. I have it's almost like I'm like Santa. Like I get excited myself. Like
yeah. Well, it does take a special person, I guess, to do that kind of gig, because it's like you really gotta be jolly, So
you do. You can't have a bad day.
Right, exactly.
A lot of pressure, and that's where I'm like, I don't think I could be a Santa, because it's just like I like to be happy, but I like to be jolly, but there's some I don't have not every day is a jolly day for me. So
that's true, but maybe something happens when you become Santa, where you're just like, fuck, I'm Santa, dude. Like, imagine that though. You wake up in the morning, you say you might be Santa someday. You wake up and you're like, like, what do? I'm fucking Santa. That's my job, man. I'm Santa, dude. Like this is the craziest. I feel like I would wake up every morning with like a crazy sense of wonder of like, holy shit, like this is fucking wow. This is my life. I'm Santa. So I say go for it, Sam. It's close already. You're a seasoned elf, right? So it's time to. It's
time to graduate to the big guy.
Start growing that beard.
I also personally like I will like now, having done it 10 years, I had a younger staff of elves, if you want to call them elf. Like, if people call me an elf, I'm like, I'm not an elf, I kind of like the cranky elf. I'm not an elf, I'm a helper. I'm a manager. And so I try my best not to, to take that role, but I am in essence an elf.
All right. I did not, no offense intended there. I thought it sounded cool.
I know. And there's I forget the name of the story, but the Sedaris story about working with Santa Claus. It's pretty similar. There's a whole story that he wrote, a kind of a satirical look at working with Santa Claus, and has been my experience, definitely.
Yeah. So usually we wrap it up with what's next for you. You have a ton of shit. So where to begin? What do you want to start? You got speaking gigs coming up. It's going to come out like the first week in February. So
I'm speaking all over the country. So I do, for me, the bigger ones. So I'm kind of, the one that I would love to promote is there's the horror convention in Maine, Augusta, Maine, coming up in September. That one is regional and local, and I highly recommend going there. We have some great people, but it's a combination of horror and paranormal, so it's a kind of interesting combination. There's a true crime called Paracon in Waterbury, Connecticut. That's in July. I'm doing one event in Nashua, New Hampshire. Pretty much booked every weekend and traveling all over the country. To me, like the big one of the season that I went to for my first time last year was Dragon Con, and that's in Atlanta, Georgia. And that was amazing. So there was like thousands and thousands of people all dressed up in various like cosplay costumes. And it was just so much fun. And the lectures were amazing. So I lectured with Richard Estep and some other people that are from all over the country on panels. And it was just some of the best panels I've ever been a part of. And that was in Atlanta. And that's in August, doing CreepyCon. I'm doing, all sorts of smaller investigations. Spirit Squad's still going on. I'm also releasing, this is kind of a big deal, as I'm releasing Haunted Travels Anthology. And another group that I run called Ghost Writers. These are people that want to write about the paranormal. We have a community together, and we're putting together an anthology that's coming out in June or July of this year of various stories from all over the country, and that's coming out for sale, and I'll be promoting that until October.
Sam, where do you find the energy to do all this stuff? Because I'm listening to this and I'm like, Jesus, dude, I'm exhausted just hearing all the stuff you're doing. I'm like, holy shit, dude. Well,
it's getting harder. Like as I'm getting older, it's getting harder every year to do this. But I will say that I devoted my whole life to this, like almost to the point where even like my side gig, like managing Santa, there's still a kind of a supernatural element to it.
Yeah, for sure.
So I feel like that this is my calling. So it's what I'm supposed to do. So I kind of keep doing it until I drop, like I was just sort of like my body is definitely not like it was 10 years ago when I first started doing all these events. And I will say that it's I'm slowing down a little bit, but not much. Yeah.
Well, events, people on the outside get envious, but it's like, I once like had a few drinks at a conference and on Q&A was like talking about this, and it's like, they're not the greatest thing in the world if you're a speaker. It's a lot of things. You got to take time. For me, you got to take time off from work. You got to travel. Someplace you got to fly. You got to pack. You got to have a presentation. You have to perform. It's like, there's a lot. So to do it as often as you're doing it, it's, hats off to you. Because, like, I think I'd be kind of like clawing at the walls of the hotel room after, like, the third or fourth trip of the year.
Yeah, what I've done is I view all these different trips. Well, my main motivation across the board is to expose people to my books. Like that's always been my underlying motivation. But also too, like I'm genuinely interested in the paranormal. So I do I love talking about it. I love giving my theories. Like I really have gone into the egregores and thought form manifestations, but I'm interested in cryptids too. And I know you talk a lot about cryptids as well. I'm really interested in puckwudgies, and I would love to nice. Go in the puckwudgie realm. And you talked about Burlington. I bet you there's puckwudgies in Burlington. I can feel it.
Interesting. All right.
Yeah. So it's
to go down.
It is a lot of work, and I try my best not to book myself every weekend, although I end up getting booked every weekend.
Well, folks can find out more at sambaltrusis.com. It's BALTRUSIS, sambaltrusis.com. And there's a thing there. You click on that. It has all the stuff. It's really an amazing, just the array of books you've written and all the stuff you're doing. I mean, you just said you have the Spirit Squad group. You've got another group. Again, it's like, bro, slow down. Leave some for the rest of us.
Yeah, and for me, like the Spirit Squad group, my goal really is to mentor people so they can shine, so they can go out and do all the lectures for me. So I'm kind of like, I feel like that I'm kind of like working with the up and coming, the future of the paranormal field, and future authors, future investigators, and psychic mediums. And so I feel like I'm doing my part in it. I don't necessarily want to be in the spotlight. I like being sort of on the down low, where I'm not in the spotlight and I'm working with everybody else who eventually do that, because I really don't like being in the spotlight, to be honest with you. So, yeah, I mean, who knows how much longer I will do these events every weekend? But my goal is to keep writing books and keep doing my thing.
There you go. Well, it's been fantastic getting to know you, man. Like I said, the algorithms in Kismet cross paths and put us in touch with each other. And I hope we can get into some kind of trouble here in Massachusetts. You're only right down the road, so we got to put our heads together. Maybe that mall idea, that would be a lot of fun.
I love the mall idea. I definitely feel like I can cut these running amok in the Burlington Mall. I can already sense it.
There you go. Well, it's been a lot of fun, Sam. Thanks for coming on the show.
All right. Thank you so much, Binnall.